There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
Welcome to another episode of the Twilight Highlight Zone. I'm your host, Jeff Cork. And each week, we watch 5 episodes of the Twilight Zone, talk about our thoughts. I'm here with my friend, Ben Hanson.
Oh, friend. Thank you, Jeff Cork.
This week, we're talking about episodes 11 through 15.
Of Season 3.
Season 3, exactly.
Are we halfway? Does this mark the halfway point, this episode?
It could. I haven't skipped ahead.
Yeah, the
so
Season 4 stuff is kind of funky because it's hour long. So we're
That's
bracing
correct.
for that.
It's quite a brace. We're going to start off this block with an episode I like to call Still Valley because that's the name of the episode. So we start off with the Confederate Army, right?
I feel like we just saw this.
I know, we're in the Civil War again, which is fascinating stuff. A lot of material to mine here. Confederate Army, they're looking down, they're like scouts. They got to go to this city because they hear that the Union is going there to resupply. They send a couple of scouts. Guy goes there, lo and behold, the army is there. They thought they were gone because it was quiet. They are there, they're totally frozen. All of them frozen. So he wanders around a little bit and finds one person who's seemingly unaffected by this freezing epidemic, and it is a guy who says, oh yeah, I did this. It's totally, I'm a witch. My father was a witch. Him before it, whatever. Who knows how long our family's been doing it. A long time. And I did this, and I tell you what, I can do this to the whole army if you want. It's going to kill me, but you'll have to do the spell. You have to use this magical book, right? And to do it, you'll have to side with the devil himself. And the guy's like, okay. So he goes back. And nobody believes him. And then another scout comes and is like, oh yeah, this is totally legit. Everyone's frozen. He's like, okay. Then they look through the spell book, and not only do they have to side with Old Scratch, they have to denounce God. And at that point, they throw the book into the fire and say, to heck with it. We'll just go to Gettysburg, see what happens there. The end.
And they want to bury their cause with dignity.
With dignity.
And that's how the South lost the Civil War.
That's how that one episode where they're all walking in single file.
Yeah.
This was like the precursor to that episode.
That's why the last person walking was the book with 2 little legs right behind him blinking.
He was like the Bill from Schoolhouse Rocks.
With evil eyebrows.
I think it said witchcraft on his cover too, which is a little, I don't know. Would you want to have that on the cover?
You try and hide it a little bit. You wouldn't want it on the shelf. It's not a good coffee table book, I don't think.
No.
And that old guy, he looked like such a crazy character. He reminded me of like Jafar's old man costume from the beginning of Aladdin.
Yes.
Where he's like, hee, go in the cave.
Yeah.
Like, that's how ridiculous this guy was.
I thought was interesting about this is we've seen a similar thing on a previous episode of Twilight Zone.
So similar, yeah.
Elegy. You remember that episode?
Yeah, where they go into this small town and it turns out that it's a funeral planet.
Right.
Or a cemetery, graveyard,
weird,
wax museum planet.
People like being memorialized at their favorite time.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's not what these people are doing. They're just like being soldiers. But
Yeah.
I will say, I think they learned from their mistakes. They didn't get any like obvious blinkers. They didn't cast them. They panned really quickly. They didn't hold the shot. I mean, there's some guys like shifting their weight a little bit because they are
Muskets
people.
moving a little bit. Yeah,
But
yeah.
By and large, they did a fantastic job of selling the illusion. There's like guys in like with buckets, and it looks like they were in the middle of.
That's the thing. There's one guy who's towards the back of the wagon. He's holding this giant barrel in outstretched arms. And even if that's the lightest barrel, it still would be super tough to hold still. And he does a great job.
Yeah.
Also, like, this is so similar to Elegy. It has like the same stinger before the second commercial break of like, oh, it's a completely still town. What's going on? And then one person moves and it's like, dun, 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 dun.
Oh, it was like you just see this hand fumbling through the window.
Yeah. And then it turns out to be this old man. The first tease of what's going on in this town, and I'd love to know if this is intentional, but when I was first watching it, I wrote down in my notes, because when they're the 2 scouts talking, and they're like, hey, look down at that town, we got to go in there. And the one guy's a coward. That's like a weird plot that doesn't really go too many places. I guess the coward wants to invoke Satan to win the war.
Yeah.
That's kind of where that goes.
Cowardice is kind of a big deal in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And so the 2 scouts are looking down at the town, and it cuts to the town, and you notice from like the lack of grain that like they're just cutting to a still photograph of like an old timey town. And I wrote that on my notes, like, that's so cheap, that's stupid. But now I wonder if they were being cheap or they're being super clever by cutting to a still photograph because the entire town is frozen.
Why does it have to be one or the other?
It has to. And then when he gets down there and he's wandering around this town, it's like, oh, how could this be? Are you guys dead or asleep?
Yep.
My theory was that because of the coward's conversation with him earlier about how war used to be like a children's game and then it got more serious, that type of thing, I thought the twist was going to be that they were all in a child's game and they were all toys. Or they're going to somehow play back into that conversation.
Characters being toys is absurd.
That would never,
that's
ever
the dumbest
happen.
Concept
a life-size
ever.
person looking like a toy.
Oh, shut up, Ben Hanson.
All right, thank you. So that's where I was expecting this episode to go. I didn't really expect witchcraft, but why not?
Yeah, witchcraft is kind of like in my opinion, kind of the slightly more clever on the continuum, but it's butting heads right up against It Was All a Dream.
Yeah.
When you start bringing mysticism into stuff.
Also, I don't understand. So when they're frozen, they can still hear things. He makes it clear. And then...
Because they're not dead. He makes the distinction. They're not dead.
Yeah, hey, we're cool. I mean, no need to press charges. We're all good. But then, like, he freezes the protagonist in his place. But then he's like, if you can understand me, wink your eye.
Yes.
And the guy does. So it's like they can move some things. Why wouldn't all those soldiers just constantly be winking?
Well, maybe he had like a different level that he was doing just as a thought experiment. Like,
oh, I see.
Here, I'll show you. Here's like, I'll crank it up to 8 for you. Everyone else is getting like a full 10 treatment. Now, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
If you were one of the Confederate soldiers, knowing how things were, would you just run around and bayonet everybody?
Oh, that would be... See, this is the problem with this episode, is there's so many things that would be more fun than where this episode goes. And
bayoneting everyone.
It would be a super fun episode, wouldn't it? If he just goes around and just stabs everybody. And they don't have to be graphic about it. I'm not a weird gore porn guy. But like, it would be a more entertaining premise. Or even at the end, when they choose to reject Satan, it falls into that camp of, well, it makes sense for you guys, but how much more fun would the episode be if they embraced Satan and then froze the entire Union army?
Yeah.
And so it's that weird thing where as a viewer, you're rooting against your protagonist. And this is a weird comparison, but did you see Tron Legacy?
No.
Watching Tron Legacy, I had that same thing where the villain in that movie wanted to escape Tron and get into the real world and kind of take over the real world with his digital army. And as the protagonist, they're fighting against him. But it's like, as a viewer, you just want to see that because it'd be so much more entertaining as a film.
Yeah. Wherever they go with that.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe they're going to touch into it with the next
Maybe
one.
we won't go like total psycho like you were doing with like enjoying watching everyone die. No blood, so it's cool. Maybe what they could have done instead is like tied a rope across the street right at about like ankle height.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
Everyone like when they resume marching, they just kind of collapse in a big pile and then they realize the absurdity of war.
And then they all laugh.
Yes.
And then the coward is killed for being a coward.
Exactly. Coward. You're yellow. It's disgusting.
I like that he used the witchcraft towards the end, but he didn't. Was it like he projected it far away so he didn't see the consequences? But that's what the other troop unit saw. And that's how they validated that this is in fact true. Because he tried out the spell on some other soldiers.
Right.
But it was just kind of like a vague, like, I'm just using it over there. And then they stumbled across those people.
It must have been.
I had the impression that like he didn't get up close and personal with it.
He didn't. Maybe he just didn't know what he was doing. He's
Yeah.
new to witchcraft.
So he knows that you have to embrace Satan.
Right.
But it never crossed his mind that the good Lord might not be cool with that.
Yeah, I thought was he just going to be like, okay, I'm gonna play both sides at the same time? What'd you give this one?
I ended up giving this one a 5.
I gave this one a 6, which is 1/3 of 666 in honor of the devil.
Next episode called The Jungle. I am so excited.
I'm really excited to talk about this one too.
All right, without spoiling what I think of this episode, the basic plot is there's a guy that works for a corporation and they're building a hydroelectric dam in the deep, dark heart of Africa. And his wife is very superstitious. They just moved back from Africa, back into Manhattan, I think.
Yes.
And she is very worried about the tribal natives of Africa cursing them and the shamans torturing them. Shamans.
Witch
doctors torturing them from across the ocean because they disturb the native lands of Africa with this hydroelectric dam. So this guy says, oh, that's nonsense. And then slowly starts coming around and tries to convince the board that, hey, it's, magic, it's real, superstitions, you should kind of be worried about it. And then throughout the course of the episode, he is tortured by the sounds of Africa and is constantly scared of getting killed by these weird curses. And then the end of the episode, he finally gets back to his house, opens the bedroom door, and there is a lion who has eaten his wife and is now sitting on the bed, and then it eats him.
Yes.
Africa!
The dark continent.
Yeah, this
Africa.
Boy, when this one started, right out of the gate, it's him walking into the living room where his wife is, and he's like,
yes.
Hey, I was looking for my cufflinks. I couldn't find it. I was right next to this human finger. And
human finger, some kind of talon, some weird feathered voodoo doll thing. And the whole time he was like going through it, his hands were shaking. And I was like, what is going on with this actor?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize until later, it's like, it's on purpose because he's losing his grip, right? Or at least I hope so, because they incorporate that. He holds his hands out in front of him later on. And you see him kind of shaking.
Yeah, he's slowly losing it throughout the episode. Yeah. He seems better in the beginning, but when it starts to go off the rails is when he opens the front door to leave to go to work, and there's a goat, and the bongo drums start just start slowly building underneath it as he sees this goat.
If you've ever seen the episode of, I don't know what the episode would be called, but when Donald Duck is in the in the stew pot and the natives are gonna eat him, that's the kind of music that is like scoring this entire thing.
Yeah, or it's like the sound that the Jumanji board makes on the beach in the end of Jumanji.
Or all the birds that you imagine when you think of Africa. Yeah. Or like the jungle. Basically, this is the Jungle Cruise from Disneyland.
Yes, that is exactly it. He's at work, and I liked that part where it might be a cliche speech, but I still liked it when he's like, oh, you make fun of these natives in Africa for being superstitious. Look at us. We're magicians and warlocks sitting here in our corporate office building with no 13th floor, and you have a lucky rabbit's foot.
Like, what time is it? And the guy fishes it. Well, what's this? A keychain with a rabbit's foot.
Yeah. And so he just kind of connects the dots between
you and astrology. Well, astrology's done very fine I've done very fine by astrology. Thank you very much, young man.
So he's just connecting superstitions in America with the ridiculous shaman witchcraft nonsense in Africa.
I think it was kind of like we're kind of putting Africa in a really bad light. We're part of the problem too.
Turns out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one of the cheapest episodes for them to produce because so much of it is just the sounds of Africa.
Right.
Like oh God, it's so cool. So he goes into the phone booth and I think he's trying to dial out, and then it rings, and then it is just the sounds of Africa and weird birds screaming, and the phone dangles and he runs away. Yeah. And then he keeps hearing lions throughout.
So when I was watching this episode, we have a cat that kind of ingratiated himself into our lives, and he was on my chest as I was watching it, and he was losing his mind with all the animal sounds. Like his ears were just totally flattened back, and he was very confused by the whole thing. So that's a completely irrelevant detail to our listeners.
So you're saying you felt guilty about the strip mining in Africa?
I thought, a hydroelectric dam, what a cost. My ears would go back too. Before he goes to the phone booth, though, remember, he's at the bar talking about like, I found this in my pocket, this lion's tooth charm, and he like slams it onto the bar for effect and then walks out of the bar.
Because his wife put it in there.
Right, and leaves it behind. And
so without the lucky amulet, that's when he really starts getting tortured.
Exactly.
But I like that bar scene where he's talking with his friend, and it's like good, jokey, drunken banter, where he's saying like, hey, if I had to get a goat in an hour, where would I go? It's like the toe thing for Big Lebowski, I guess.
Yeah. And then he's like, okay, screw this. I'm not going to walk to my apartment. I'm going to take a cab. What could go wrong there? So he gets in the cab, and the guy's like, okay, let's go. And then they stop at a traffic light, and nothing's happening. And he's like, sir, driver, it's a green light. You can go. And then it kind of shakes him and just slumps over dead. It's like this African curse affects anyone who is like getting in the way.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like you never know if this episode is in reality or if it's in the Twilight Zone,
Yeah.
That's stupid. That was stupid to say, but you never know where it's at.
Yeah.
And it's Manhattan, but the streets are empty except for that driver who gets cursed and dies. And there's a hobo later.
Yeah.
And he's like trying to bribe the hobo to escort him home because he's so freaked out of walking through Central Park.
And right before you see the hobo, he's like, there's a costume shop, right? And he sees like a gorilla mask. And there is a very real guy holding a spear. And you can see like it's a real person. He's got like, I don't know that he blinks or whatever, but I wonder why they had a guy. Because he doesn't move.
Well, yeah, mannequins are expensive.
Yeah, where are you going to get a mannequin?
And it has the crazy cut to shot of him with the elephant.
Yeah.
Just to really drive it home.
Yeah.
And then the hobo disappears. So that kind of reconfirms what is going on. I guess he is in an alternate dimension where he's just constantly being tortured. He really takes his time going through Central Park too.
Yeah, that's the one place you think he wouldn't want to linger. And you hear monkey sounds, and you see the trees are rustling around like monkeys are in there.
Yeah.
So
I wrote down really early in this episode, I think right when he puts that lion's tooth down in my notes, he had better see a lion at some point in this episode.
Yes.
And maybe I was just used to Jumanji. This whole episode's very Jumanji, but I was waiting for that shot of him opening a door and a lion's there.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got back to his apartment, because they foreshadowed his wife in the very beginning that you are going to die by the end of the day.
Yeah.
Or you aren't making it back alive or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I knew at some point he was going down. And then when he got to his apartment, I was so happy that there was a lion sitting in his bedroom.
You know our hero? He might recognize him from another episode of The Twilight Zone.
I can think of where. Which one?
He's the guy who delivered the bot on The Lonely.
Oh, Mr. Delivery Man.
Exactly.
Wow. Did you recognize him or did you look it up?
I looked it up because I was like, that guy seems super familiar.
Wow.
A lot of those guys do, though. They have that weird Walt Disney kind of quality to them.
Yeah. Why do you think they recycle so many people in the Twilight Zone?
I would imagine this guy showed up on time and was delightful to work with. So let's bring him back.
All right. So clearly, well, maybe not clearly. Do you think Rod Serling was going for a slavery analogy with this whole episode? The guilt of slavery or something?
I don't know that slavery was a factor. I think it was more just arrogance of our culture.
Of the white man.
The white man.
I don't think there's anything wrong with this episode. I thought it was super fun throughout the entire thing. Mm-hmm. I was always on the edge of my seat. Every time there's a new Africa torture device, I was always on board.
Did you think that cat lady was going to show up?
Yep. Maya the cat girl. She was just around the corner.
Yeah.
Hiding in the bedroom. I like just the very subtle, there's no dramatic reveal, but just the subtle dead wife in the room with the lion.
Yeah, just like a wig.
Yeah, it already took her out. I really liked this episode.
Yeah.
I ended up giving it a 9.
Really?
Yeah.
I liked it a lot too. I gave it a 7.
A 7?
Yeah.
Okay. It was just one of those where, I was constantly on the edge of my seat. I thought it was fun throughout the entire thing. Mm-hmm. Had a cool, fun ending. Mm-hmm. Done. That's
there you
a 9.
Go. Next episode, Once Upon a Time. And this one is complete departure from anything we've seen before and probably will see since, because when we begin, it takes the tone of a silent movie.
Yeah.
With those little title cards, and when someone speaks, they mouth the dialogue if you've never seen a silent movie before. And another card will show up with the words, right? And piano music accompanying the whole thing, right? The gist of it is that there's this guy who is a janitor, and he's grumpy. In 1890, he's grumpy because the price of meat is through the roof and fancy hats are super expensive and people are racing down the streets with their penny farthing bicycles and policemen are giving him a hard time. So he's a janitor for a couple of famous inventors, and they invent a time-traveling helmet. So he puts it on after he loses his hat or pants in an awful falling in a trough of water accident.
Hilarious.
So he's pantsless, and he goes back, he moves it forward in time because he's like, anything will be better than this terrible 1890 nonsense. So he moves it to 1960. And then it turns to a traditional sound, a talkie, if you will. And it's super loud. Meat is even more expensive. Fancy hats, as you might expect, are crazy expensive. Instead of buggy whips, you have spark plugs being advertised. And the hat breaks. Someone takes the hat. Someone else takes the hat. He's chasing after it. Then this other guy comes, and fortunately, that guy is an electronic scientist, and he's like, I can fix this hat. And they go to get it repaired. As it turns out, this guy is also an enthusiast, and 1890 is his favorite year. And he talks about how great it's going to be, and they both go back to 1890 because the guy is like, I just want to go home. And the guy from 1960 hates it. It sucks. It's boring. So 1890 guy puts the hat on him, sends him back in the future. The end.
To each their own is the lesson.
To each their own is the lesson.
There we go. So when this episode started, I immediately thought, this is the same TV show as Death's Head Revisited. Just think of the leap between these two episodes.
Yeah. I couldn't think of two more, like in the same season, just like a few episodes apart.
Yeah. So they were going for.
This is Buster Keaton, I should add.
Yeah, they're just trying to go for a Buster Keaton.
Well,
homage.
it was Buster Keaton too, and it was like the actor.
Wait, that was literally Buster Keaton?
That was literally Buster Keaton.
I didn't even see that.
Yeah, that was a pretty good performance of a Buster Keaton-like role, and they thought we'll cast Buster Keaton. So it's like super slapsticky. Like at one point, there guys hiding behind another guy so that they don't see the police doesn't see him.
But the fun thing about this episode is, it starts out at like that weird 18 frames per second sped up kind of look, like the silent movies. But then they go to the 60s and they keep the same tone, where they try and do the same kind of slapsticky stuff in the 60s with, modern cameras, and it comes across as bizarre.
It is not funny.
And there's no music underneath to kind of soften it, so it just comes across as them trying really hard to be wacky and comedic, and it just feels awkward.
Yeah, like there's two kind of extended bits with a vacuum cleaner. Like he sits on it at one point, and then the other time it's just really loud. He gets stuck in a box.
Yeah, weird sarcophagus that's in that repair store. But the bit with the fat guy, I think, is the funniest actual comedic bit in the episode, where the cop's trying to find him and he keeps trying to like put himself behind the fat guy depending on what angle the cop's looking at him at. Yeah. Maybe that's that fat humor that one commentator was talking about, like making fun of fat people.
I think making fun of fat people is also Fats Brown also might be
exactly
from a game of pool. There could be a reference to that.
Yeah, but like when he first comes across the fat guy in the beginning, of course they like run right into him, and then he's like sitting on his face and stuff, and it's not great.
Yeah, it was really silly, and it's exceptionally broad, but like it was successful in that was physical humor from the silent era, and they did that really well. Yeah. You can question whether or not that's something you want to see, because when it like was regular footage, it looked like the Three Stooges. You know what I mean? It was like that. It's that level of comedy. Something about it being like the 18 frames per second. And title cards, it adds a certain amount of charm to it.
Yes.
And when it doesn't have that to fall back on, for me at least, it's just like, man, I am too old for this.
This made me wonder, if I took a show like Big Bang Theory and edited it down to 18 frames a second, and sped it up a little bit, black and white, and then put intertitles in there,
right,
after every joke,
right.
I wonder how well it would fall in line. Just take like the most physical moments from some modern sitcom, and just to see if it would fall in line.
I don't think it would work because it's all reactions, for the most part.
I guess
modern sitcoms, it's like some guy at the refrigerator with a glass of something looks at another character and says some like pithy observation, and then the other guy responds with like another equally witty retort.
Yeah.
So there you go.
It's weird that like the 1890s in this episode is not really 1890s. It's like the movie version of the 1890s. Everything's kind of this weird exaggerated cartoon-like land.
Yeah.
Chickens everywhere. Apparently chickens have taken over the world in 1890. Yeah. We didn't know.
Well, a really depressing part for me, at least, was that the hat only goes up to 1990.
I saw that, yeah.
And I was thinking, God, we would, you know what I mean? Like, that hat doesn't do us any good at all. Like, we can't travel to the future with that hat.
We couldn't even really see interesting parts in time.
And it only works 30 minutes at a time. That's the whole gimmick. The inventors say it's 30 minutes, and I don't know if that's because the sparklers that are on top of it are only lit for 30 minutes or what.
As it bursts into flames every time it goes through time. It's a weird episode.
It is a super weird. And I like at the very end, though, you have like that player piano doing the Twilight Zone theme.
Yeah. I was bummed out in the beginning when it was the 1890s style. I thought, it's going to be cool because Rod Serling is going to give his speech over intertitles. But then no, it just cuts to him and he looks normal. It's with the modern cameras and he's just speaking.
Yeah.
It's like, why wouldn't they take advantage of that whole
format? At least
format?
he could have worn like a bolo tie.
Yeah, something.
Or so some dumb old-timey hat.
Yeah, this is Rod Serling's homage to comedies of his youth.
Yes.
And we'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Grandpa.
I ended up giving this one a 6.
I gave it the same because I thought that the strength of the silent stuff was enough to kind of help buoy the rest of the stuff.
I thought just the idea of thinking about, the formats and just playing in that space was fun, but it was not a great episode.
And also the helmet looked pretty cool.
Yeah, it's true. Hey, no one's down the helmet. All right. Next one is 5 characters in search of an exit. Opens up in a white room and is with a soldier. and he doesn't know how he got there or what's going on. He slowly encounters a clown, a ballerina, a hobo, and a guy playing the bagpipes. He doesn't understand what's happening. They're all confused about how they got there, who they are, and they all try to get out. They eventually get out by stacking on top of each other and creating like a grappling hook out of a gun or a sword. The soldier gets to the top of this weird white cylinder trying to figure out what's going on. He falls over the edge into the snow, and then it's revealed that that is a toy collection bin and that they are all toys. Mm-hmm. And then a child comes by and throws the soldier back in, and they're stuck there forever.
Yes.
This is a really sloppy, boring version of Toy Story. That's basically what's going on here. Yeah.
And you forgot there's also every once in a while, this won't have the punch now that we know what's going on, but this giant gong would ring occasionally and shake them to their very cores. The plastic cores, now we know. And it's they're ringing a bell. And hey, give us your dolls.
But it's weird that that's the only sound that they hear inside of this bucket.
That's true.
They don't hear like the outside world at all, except for this gonging
bell. Giant people say, hey, bring us dolls.
Yeah, and also like they keep focusing. The whole thing is a mystery about what's going on here, and it's a little bit like a puzzle episode, kind of like the one where the plane lands, where Rod Serling's like, hey, try and figure this out.
Yeah.
We'll promise we'll reveal it to you, but we're not going to solve the problem here.
Yeah.
Because these toys are screwed. And it keeps like cutting up to the top of the cylinder, and there's this weird like light.
Yes.
And I guess now it's the street light.
Yeah.
But it was kind of confusing looking at the time.
Okay. So the weird thing for me is at the end, the little girl, they put the soldier in the bin, right?
Yeah.
At that point, they're not actors anymore. It's this weird transitional phase where they're mannequins.
Yeah.
And they, not only that's kind of creepy, but they weren't mannequins, but they were and then they had like these super grotesque painted eyes. And then the ballerina just starts weeping because she's going to get played. The Rod Serling implies, they're all going to find a home and everything is going to be great. But that was it made me feel super gross. Like to see the mannequin, weird. Like, I don't know why they needed to do that.
Why were they not alive anymore? Maybe maybe the problem is they wanted to show that they were still that size or that, I don't know, that detailed. But if you have the humans again, then maybe there's like an implied drama and they have to continue the story.
We already saw that though. You know what I mean? Like
maybe it's like at the end, like you can't close an episode with, and now they're back in there and they could keep talking about this forever. I don't know. And maybe it's just an easy way for them to be like, they're still the same people. Shut up. They're not going to talk. They're toys again.
Yeah.
Or maybe
they've lost all hope. Maybe that's why they don't remember, because like they'll become self-aware after the obvious escape of tying a rope to a saber and throwing it on the edge.
Very precariously dangling on the edge of that.
I hope that at some point in my life, I have the occasion to like create an improvised grappling hook.
Yeah.
And I doubt that it would support my weight. I would fall, but
this episode did a good job with the special effect of them like all stacking on top of each other vertically, except, they filmed it just by them lying down on the ground and kind of doing that weird wiggle thing. And the ballerina has to climb to the top. She's really shoving her face into the bagpipe guy's skirt. It's just a weird shot. If you watch it again in slow motion.
I was paying it. I was like, that bagpipe, it was like a great archetype on paper, but as soon as they started stacking, I'm like, that guy's got to be the low guy. Just don't have anyone underneath him. It's no good.
Yep, he's standing on top of John Kerry, hobo man.
Yep.
Weird looking figure. And then, so they collapse the first time they try and stack to get out of there. And they mention ahead of time that they're
because of the bell.
But they mentioned ahead of time that they're going to get hurt when they fall.
Yeah.
But it was unclear when they fell if they got hurt. Like the ballerina was kind of like holding her leg, but they weren't like writhing in pain after falling for 30 feet or whatever.
Right.
So maybe they don't feel pain after all, and she just wasn't used to it.
Yeah, that could be. I don't know. I like this episode because the clown is not. I didn't find the clown to be annoying. I thought it was like
really.
I thought it was like one of the best clowns. He was like
weird Robin Williams clown.
Super weird. Like a flower pot on his head and a little tiny umbrella, which those are the hallmarks of I don't like this clown kind of clown. But it was good.
Yeah, all right. I wasn't crazy about the clown. The confusing part to me was when they asked the clown, like, hey, we'll stack on top of each other. It'll be like the trapeze, like the circus. You know all about that. And he's like, just because I'm a clown, like I should point out, like I have no memories of ever being a clown.
Yeah.
But then the rest of the episode, he still acted like an idiot clown.
That's just in his DNA.
Oh.
Like the specific clown memories he doesn't know. And I like when they're trying to cobble together a rope. He's like, okay, we just need a rope. And the clown's like, yeah, where are we going to get this rope from?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, from our clothes and all this other stuff. And then the clown starts unraveling just a rope that is
like glued to his
pants. It's like a major part of his pants is rope. It's like, that's awfully convenient.
Yeah, I like that they couldn't remember exactly how they got there. The ballerina was super depressing. She just spoke in this monotone voice. And the fun part was they were trying to figure out what was going on. And they spitballed basically the plot of every other Twilight Zone episode. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe it's all a dream. Maybe this is hell. Maybe we're on a spaceship. Just like running down every possible list that we've already gone through. This is a sensory
deprivation chamber, and one of us is trying to be an astronaut.
Maybe there's a small 6-year-old boy that has wished us to this. One of the ballerina's theories where she goes, perhaps there's a lot of dungeons like this. We've just never heard of them before. Perhaps they're for the unloved. So her best theory is that there's dungeons throughout the world that we don't know about where people that aren't loved are kept.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. That's like Eye of the Beholder. It's like for the uglies, but for the people that are uglies on the inside. That's kind of projecting as well.
Yeah, she really had a lot of problems. I'm glad they didn't dive too much into her character because she really could have made the entire episode depressing.
Yeah. That hobo really could have been a great accomplice for that too. Just looking at him, it's just sad sacks shuffling around. It contributed very little to the cause.
Yeah, that's true. I ended up giving this one a 5.
One for each character. I gave it a 7. I liked it. I don't know. There's something about it I liked, even though I sound kind of down on it.
Did you know where it was going?
No, I like that. I like the mystery of it. Just kind of.
You didn't guess that they were toys?
No.
What was your best guess?
I had no idea.
Okay.
They were in search of an exit. Next up, Equality of Mercy.
Here we go.
This is going to be a real short summary because how they managed to stretch this into a half-hour episode is pretty amazing testament to Twilight Zone.
The Purple Testament.
The Purple Testament. So we're in the middle of World War II. The Japanese have holed themselves up in a cave. There's a new guy, a new lieutenant. He comes and he's like full of piss and vinegar. And he says, all right, we're going to go storm it and kill these guys. And everyone's like, nah, this sucks. We're tired. He's like, nope, we're going to do it. Anyway, and they're like, okay. And then he pulls up his binoculars, drops them. Suddenly he comes to and he's part of the Japanese. And it's a whole situation, but it's reversed. And then he realizes that war stinks. And then he goes back to the Americans' side and then emphasizes the fact that war stinks. And then they let it go.
Yeah. And then they learn that they dropped the atomic bomb.
Yeah, because then everything will be fine.
And then everything was fine in the world after that.
The only notable thing, in my opinion, about this episode is that Dean, I was like, where have I seen this actor before?
Yeah, the main guy?
Yeah, it's Dean Stockwell from Quantum Leap. It's Al.
Wait, which guy? The piss and vinegar guy?
Yeah.
Okay, I was wondering.
You thought it was Leonard Nimoy, you weirdo?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I was wondering the same thing about the kind of war ragged soldier in the beginning, the one that's like, okay, all right, let's go along with this jackass.
Who is it?
He was the guy who traveled forward in time in the execution. He was the badass guy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, remember because I remember saying they looked like an overweight, weird, evil Glenn Beck. When this episode started and they're like, oh, those people are holed up in that cave. We can't get them out. Mm-hmm. These mortar rounds, yada, yada. I just expected the twist to be that they were Americans in that cave.
Or dinosaurs, yeah.
Or I was really hoping for claymation dinosaurs, but I don't think we could really expect that. Although I didn't see the twist coming of him dropping the binoculars and that being some sort of time travel.
Oh, yeah, because he traveled through time and also had makeup applied on him.
That's my question. Was that the same?
It was the same actor.
So they weird yellow face type.
They did like a yellow face kind of thing, which even that in and of itself, that term is probably not appropriate to use. But they did something, made his eyes look stereotypically Asian. Oh boy, he did the thing with like the halting English thing that like people who try to impersonate people from Japan, like number one son.
Yeah.
Aso kind of thing.
No, keep going. I don't understand.
Let me just launch into this really great impersonation I've been working on.
It was rough. Overall, I thought it was just a nice little war lesson. Clearly, Rod Serling's never going to run out of these. And like I didn't think it was great.
No, and then like the Japanese commander was like, you've gone soft. If we go in there and they're wounded, you have no problem just killing them because this is war. That's what it's all about.
They made some reference to the fact that the Japanese were so smart that they were really good at taking out American commanders.
Like Forrest Gump.
Exactly. But like when he first gets there, he's like, hey, commander, you should, lieutenant, I think is your rank.
Yeah.
You should take the little things off your helmet and take the stripes off because they're going to shoot you if they know that you're in charge of this platoon. Like our other guys, they took the crap off, but the Japanese saw them making commanding motions with their hands and they shot them just from that. And since Rod Serling was in the war, I would imagine that that's a true story.
Who knows? And you'd think that if the Japanese in the cave were able to do that with such amazing precision, why they wouldn't just kill everybody? Because you know what? Like ultimately, these guys are bad news. Let's just kill them all.
Yeah. So did it imply that the Japanese troop that he traveled back in time to embody were the people in the cave?
You know what, Hanson? The original time period was
45.
45,
and then
right.
they went back to 42.
Right. So I don't know. That would be some really crazy, like they're very persistent if that's indeed the case. Because it was May originally.
The clue was that when the Japanese guy, when he became Japanese, when he was turning Japanese, he ran up to the cave and then there was the American soldier shooting.
Yes.
But was that one of the guys that was...
I don't recall.
Oh, you don't recall?
I don't recall.
How convenient.
My attorneys told me that I don't have to answer that question.
But again, like I didn't see this as the most offensive episode. Well, maybe racially offensive, but I didn't see it as a bad one.
Let me be clear. I think that they did about as well a job as you could do at that time.
Turning somebody Japanese.
You know what I mean? Like just in and of itself, like that's probably as good. Yeah, like I said, that's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
It's not great, but it's like if you're going to make a guy look Japanese, you got to do what you got to do, I suppose. Maybe cast a Japanese guy who also has a white guy counterpart.
Yeah, that would have been a good pairing.
Give him a scar.
Ooh,
that would have been good. Just have like a scar or a distinctive haircut.
Mohawk?
Yep. It went on so long. I was just like, they're really milking this thing. And that was the payoff, was that war stinks. Rod Serling, we all know how you feel about war. Okay, jeez.
I ended up giving this one a 6.
Wow. Now, do you think this episode would have been better if they had frozen the Japanese in place using witchcraft? Not killed them afterwards.
Not killed them.
Put them on pause until the end of the war.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. As it stands, I gave it a 4.
A 4. All right. That's not as low as I thought you were going.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there we go.
Yeah, it was a pretty mediocre batch. I think that the jungle was really fun. It was probably the highlight for me. We really should make a show where we talk about the highlights of the Twilight Zone.
Instead of just a lot of,
capitulation zone. Just kind of, All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to join us next week for another installment. And you can catch up. We'll be watching episodes 16 through 20.
It's going to be good.
It's going to be, I hope so. I'm watching these things. All right. In the meantime, let us know what you think in the comments. Rate us on iTunes if you feel like it. If you don't, hey, whatever. No big deal. Don't cost nothing.
Yeah, right on, man.
Right, whatever. Do what feels right. Jesus. Thanks again, and you can hear us next week.
Twilight.